The Menscape Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 2025 edition of the Menscape Podcast, sponsored by Ancient Spiritual Tours of Ireland, and with the one and only Edel Moylan. How are you doing, Edel?
I am doing mighty, Carl.
Thanks for
A
giving
bit
up your
nervous,
time.
but I'm here.
You're here, and thanks for giving up your time to join us. Won't you
Mm.
tell us who are you and what do you do?
Well, let me see now. I have been on a journey, as we all have, but I suppose for the last 30 or so years, I've been on a journey of healing. And more, I'd say I've just got the pension for the last year, which is fantastic. But about 17 years ago, I happened on Family Constellations, and that really brought me to my knees. It really changed something. I mean, you can never know, is it just Family Constellations or is it divine timing, or was the apple going to fall off the tree slowly, or whatever the hell, you know? But certainly for me, it began a massive transformation. And again, it wasn't an overnight job. But I have done, we'll say, thinking back over it, I actually sat down recently, and I used to say I'd done about over 40 modalities, but I've actually done over 60 modalities. And I've trained in several body modalities, biodynamic massage and psychotherapy, Shen therapy, touch for health, a whole load of things. And that meant that I was getting them myself every week, as well as psychotherapy and radionics and homeopathy. And, I would be hardcore. I'm not a butterfly. It'll be going through granite, with the Kanga hammer. That's what it felt like. But no matter what I did, I couldn't kind of come back into my body. And the level of trauma was profound. And so that has been a phenomenal journey for me. And the contrast has been bloody amazing. I mean, it has been absolutely daytime, nighttime. So I'll never ever regret, or the contrast is so precious to me. From being so consumed with self-hatred and, oh my God, it was very bleak, to say the least. But I only came back into my body, around the age of 58. So I'm a spring chicken, even though I'm on the. But anyway, it is great. And the amount of you're still in the same sandbox, but the whole world has changed around you. Do you know what I mean? That's what it feels like. And I suppose the difference with Family Constellations, it's not really interested in your story. And you were all, I think, very invested in our story and the protagonist of that story, whatever that be. So it isn't really interested. It's just interested in the facts. So the perspective of the ego, the good and the bad and all that is sort of taken. It loses steam in that, in Family Constellations. That's as I see it anyway. And it brings you into the wider lens of the soul. A much, much vaster perspective rather than me and do you know what I mean? That's where I was all my life, I was trying to annihilate myself. So there was no going forward anywhere because I was so busy killing myself, on some level. But anyway, that's what it's been for me.
So you say 17 years ago you happened across it. In my in my recent book, The Power of the Written Word, I have a nice little paragraph, well, maybe more than that,
Mm,
about how it was an African system that was brought to the West by a guy called Bert Hellinger.
yeah.
So how did you happen across it? Was it that you were looking for something for yourself? Like you don't go looking for it with the intention of becoming a facilitator. I imagine that
Oh
comes
God,
later.
absolutely not, Carl. Like I would have been completely and absolutely terrified of people. So I wouldn't be bloody facilitator of a fucking group. You know what I mean? The last thing in the world. And I was in groups and in groups and in groups and in groups, for years and years and years and training. But I was like a rat scuttling around the edges of the group. I was full of shame and I couldn't relax, and I was just barely hanging in. So, and even the fact, like when you do a constellation, you're normally with a big group of people that you don't know, and to do a constellation, you go up and sit on the hot seat or whatever. I wouldn't be somebody who would be, oh, let me up there, but my body was not going to let me out of that room without sitting up on the bloody seat. And it was funny because Noel, my husband, was there with me. And my husband would not be into any of that. I don't know how he was there. I don't even know, because I'd have given up long ago in asking him, but I can't remember. But the universe must have orchestrated it. But he was there for that. I think it was a weekend. I'm not sure. No, it was a day. Sorry, it was a day. But
Where was that? Was that away from here? Were you gone
no, it was in
somewhere
Galway.
together in
It was in
Galway?
Galway. Yeah, and my teacher, he wasn't my teacher then, but um, Barry Foley, he's since died. But he was an amazing teacher. He was amazing. He was a total all rounder. He wasn't a therapist. He was in the Navy, and he flew airplanes as well. And but he was amazing. And he when he was doing constellation, he's very intuitive, and he would be very much into precision. And so he would be taking out, it'd be like as if he was going out to sea with a ship, and he would make sure that all his crew would come back safe. And that level of holding, and safety over time, I did 4 years with him and 2 years with somebody else up in Dublin. But so, I mean, it was a big, big, long journey. I don't think it's something you can learn how to do.
Did you
It's
meet
like,
Bert, or did you know him, or did your man
no, sorry,
Barry
I
know
didn't. But
him?
no, I didn't. But Barry had experience of him, all
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
mine was on a second hand. Um, but
It sounds like he was a good teacher, Edel.
it's not even like I've been asked to teach it myself, Carl, and I've said no. I haven't a fucking clue. It's my body. It's literally, I can't explain it because it's not something. It's not it's frequency, I suppose. It's literally, it's about our own journey and dissolving back, into surrendering into the body, I suppose, into form. Um, and because it's not about technique, it's not about I stepped in and you step out. It's not about that. It's not a dance as such. It's I don't know. It's you have to step into the unknown, and with somebody who had that amount of torturous terror in her, it's a miracle. But my body is 100% passive and receptive. I'm in a strategic world with no oars, no 5-year plan, no, I haven't a fucking clue. I'm only meant to be a well, people meant to draw from me, but I can't go in and tell you what's in there. So if I'm with Egypts, I'll be a profound Egypt. If I'm with savants, I'll be another savant, because they'll pull themselves out of me, and so then I'll find myself through the other. So so that was one of the reasons I was so traumatized, because I feckin' took everything in and thought I was it.
So there's a word that's coming up to me to share with you for that, and
Yeah.
that word is attunement.
Attunement, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that's definitely, yeah.
Like an
Attunement.
instrument, you're kind of tuning it into the environment. I think Buddy wants to say hi. Come on, say hi
Oh,
to Edel.
hello. I left my little one out of the room. Ah,
He's just a
Cocker
big
Spaniel, isn't it?
he's a big smelly bundle of love and playfulness and joy.
Oh my God, we've got one here. I mean, they're so healing. My God, they're so healing.
And he's a rescue dog too.
Easy. Mm,
Yeah, it's funny
he's
how
lovely.
we find ourselves in the world, things that are mirrored back to us. I'm a bit of a rescue dog myself, Edel.
I was going to say that. I stopped. I stopped. I was going to jump in when you said like. Anyway, me
Yeah,
too. Me too. But I suppose the one thing, the rescue. I was the one to rescue myself.
right.
My hobby.
That's
My
the
hobby.
point. That is a
Yeah.
really important point. You have to you cannot sit there waiting to be rescued. You have to rescue yourself in this world, in this life. And that is a
Absolutely.
really hard lesson to learn, actually, for some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But
yeah,
we're you see, we're so caught up in trying to find ourselves out there, and we've got it ass ways, I think. I don't know. But
it's
anyway, it's
it's
changing,
not
which is
even
great.
that, right? If you can imagine, I'm sat in a classroom as a kid in primary school. And I'm like the kid with the hands stretched up the most. Miss, 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 pick me. I know the capital of Egypt is Cairo. And the whole of the time I'm in primary school, I'm being conditioned to outsource my power to look for approval from outside of myself. And nobody sits you down when you're a young man or the teenage years, young man years, and says, whoa, you need to cut that crap now and start being a man and stop looking for approval outside of yourself. You just carry on. And in some cases, there's grown men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and maybe even beyond, still in that childhood phase or mentality of looking for approval from outside of themselves. And God knows I was a doormat in my own marriage for 20 odd years and didn't start waking up till I was about 44,
Yeah.
you know? And that what you described there, I had a very real experience of being on my own in an apartment in Leeds, and I'd lost my dad, I'd lost my wife, I'd lost my home, and I'd lost my family, I'd lost my children. It felt like I'd lost everything, and the phone was ringing, and I was there in tears, tearing up and all emotional and upset. And I thought, who's this reaching out to me now in my hour of need, And wallowing in the pity for myself. And it was the fucking ESB looking for money. I'm like, hello? And these cunts are, and I just looked up to God and I said, all right, I know you're taking the piss now. This is just hilarious. Like, and God's like, well, if you want a pity party, I'll give you one, you know? And I said, right. So I remember going out to the shops and it wasn't fancy, but what I did was I just went for the first time in my life and got the best of everything. I got the best bread, the best butter, the best cheese, the best hummus, the best tomatoes, the best cucumber, the best ham, and I made myself the best fucking sandwich I'd ever had in my life. And it wasn't anything about the food, it was just this literal act of being there for myself and wanting the best for myself and providing and serving myself with the best for no other reason than, well, if I can't do that for myself, how can I expect anybody else in this life to do that for me? So you rescue
Absolutely.
yourself, you learn to be there for yourself, and if not, you could end up tortured in this cycle of victimhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, like even that, reaching out is, when you've been in survival all your life, it's like the part of you that would have reached out for help or to even know it was an option or to reach out, full stop, is underused. You know, it's like as if you don't know. Like I felt it on some level that as if I was in a refill for a biro. There was nothing out the side other than beam me up, Scotty, let me out of here. Do you know what I mean? There was no pleasure and, you know, meandering and sauntering around the place. It was literally, you know, kind of survival. But that thing, you know, that you're talking about, honoring and cherishing and, you know, really caring and serving yourself. You know, I'm finding that is, you know, it's a new thing for me as well. You know, it's not something that comes naturally. You know, and I don't have many needs. You know what I mean? But yet I need to let in. You know, the joy is there, big time. Like, but and it's funny. It's through the dog, our little one Maggie, and she was called after Mary Magdalene. But because she loves her body and she loves her pleasures and whatever the hell, and but that sensual part, you know, to bring that back in, is just fantastic. And she's opened up that very much. The joy and the fun and it's great.
The Mary Magdalene is very relevant these times. Was it yesterday or the day before? Was a Magdalene Day or some honor or celebration of the Mary
Really?
Magdalene energy?
Wow. And it's funny, my mother was meant to be called Mary Magdalene, and the priest wouldn't give her the Magdalene. So she's the only one in 9 kids that have just one name. You know, her name is Mary. And so when I got the dog, I called her Mary Magdalene, you know, for you know, on some level. But I didn't know where I was going to be brought. And that's the funny thing, because it's like, oh my God almighty. And it's like, there's so much that has been fucking taken away from us. Do you know what I mean? You know, in the patriarchy, you know, men and women. You know, and there's no role models to draw from as women. Do you know what I mean? There's no, you know, the Blessed Virgin, you know, the plastic virgin. Do you know what I mean? It was all.
What
so
about the
far
Sheila and the
removed.
Gigs?
Well, Sheila and the Gig, yes, that was the, you know, she's like I am now.
The ferocious warrior woman, and she's like,
yes, and
here, have a look at my gash, and you know, there's no kind of, you know, wallflower kind of shrinking. There's no element of any of that. These were warrior women that were there to be served and seen.
Yes, but in you know, I'd say awful times. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. She doesn't look as if she was living off the fat of the land. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Necessity and whatever and ferocity, and like in this work in Family Constellations, I mean, it is a bloody privilege. I couldn't give a damn, Carl, about ancestors and whatever, you know, in the past. I couldn't give a damn. I was drowning myself, and I wasn't going to be looking what's happening behind me. It was literally let me out of here. But in the work, you know, you see and feel and witness and the most horrendous traumas and pain and whatever, and we're all just alike, you know. And the courage of those who came before, to, you know, through the most horrific circumstances, just barely been able to hand on a flicker of light, you know, to the next generation. Nothing else. You know, there wouldn't be a cushion or a fucking feather pillow, or it was literally granite and just handing it on. And, you know, when you see that that's in us, do you know what I mean? That level of, I don't care where we come from, who our tribes are, you know, whatever side of the world we're coming from, you know, there will be that level of trauma, you know, of all that we've done to each other and whatever. And unless that's metabolized on some level, you know, we're very quick to judge and take a side, you know, cut with the side at the top level of the grass, you know, that you can see above ground, and say this is bloody wrong and they shouldn't, and oh my God, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, without having any awareness of what's underneath the topsoil, and what's the debits and credits that are still active, even though we never knew about, you know, who came before us. You know, a lot of us don't. but the debits and credits are still alive. And until the traumas are metabolized and they're passed on through to us, until we can sit in the unknown and begin to, well, for me, I suppose, I now I'm learning to love myself for the first time, in my 60s. Oh my God, and life and the joy and the magic that I didn't have as a child. I mean, all of that is here now. And, but there's that, and the whole gamut of, emotion and life experience and, the whole octave, the whole range is there. Once we let go of our trauma without identifying with the terrain, the emotional terrain. But not many of us go that deep, to have that level of freedom within ourselves, by mating our rage and our joy and our, everything in between. And I think it's only in finding it inside myself, Hitler and bloody Myra Hindley or whoever the hell, to push me far enough and you'll see what comes out. It won't be sugar and spice. It won't. Fuck off. It won't. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that I am that. Yeah. But through trauma or through whatever, or, if I'm not as good at serving or giving or hold on to what the fuck I was holding on to, and you won't be dancing an Irish jig. Do you know what I mean? For whatever, all of us, and some of us are up at the top of the tree in the canopy, with the light and the birds and the sweetness and light, and then some of us are down gnarly, right down underneath the mud. And that's part of it. That's what we got to deal with. Do you know what I mean? It's not either or, but both and. But I was always trying to think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I should be nice and kind and loving and giving, like all of them up at the top of the tree. They were up there because I was down under the table fucking holding, all that wasn't integrated or expressed. Do you know what I mean? And it's only now I realize I'm not that. I'm finding my own love and my own rhythm within that.
I wonder if your reluctance to become a kind of a facilitator or a teacher of constellations is actually the qualification you need.
Back off. I have the notion the qualification that I need is to turn up and be myself. And by golly, I'm doing that. And fuck off if you want any credentials or anything like that. Because that's I really feel passionate about that. It's really turning up and being Edel. That's all. And Edel doesn't have to be wonderful or fantastic. And in being that, turning up in that frequency, because it was a vacant lot, Carl. Mm-hmm. Most of us, if you're not, if you're trying to get away from yourself or trying to be loved or trying to be approved of, we're not at home. So and to turn up now as myself before I kick my clogs and just be an ordinary creature. And that is extraordinary for me. That is extraordinary.
Ordinary is not a word I would use about you.
Why fuck, I'm ordinary. It's funny. It's funny, Carl. It's so funny. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, and we like to be unique and special. That's the arrogance, up your hole. But now I have discovered that I am a root. All I am, I root down where others shoot out from. So I'm a root creature. Do you know what I mean? I'm a dandelion. And fucking dandelions are all over the place. So I'm not bloody unique. I'm very ordinary. And that's the disowned middle ground that a 4 doesn't come into unless they're really lucky to deal with their shit. Do you know what I mean? So it's the ordinary, because we're terrified of being ordinary, because if we're ordinary, we would be trashed altogether. We wouldn't be loved. We have to earn our love by being extraordinary or trying to be extraordinary.
That's one of the ways we can sort of, as a child, manipulate our environment, and all we ever needed was to be seen, heard, and loved. And as a child, that never goes away. We might be in older bodies, but we're still that child that needs to be seen and loved and heard. And if you don't receive that or you don't get that for one reason and another, I was lucky. My parents were decent people, but they were obviously carrying two bagfuls of their own shite as well. And I ended up developing, shall we say, defense mechanisms, control mechanisms, whatever and you get to an age where you realize your whole fucking personality is just the sum of these trauma responses. So you're
Absolutely.
like, right, okay, well, I can either keep that or let that go. Or if you can manage to just drop a lot of the things that you've picked up along the way, you get to see where enlightenment is a process. It's not a spark in a moment of time. It's a gradual shedding of this baggage to become lighter and cleaner, you know?
And very simple. It really is simple, more
It
than,
is,
yeah,
and if
so
you make
simple.
it complicated, then
Mm.
then there's usually a red flag there because it's not about being special or complicated. It is simple, and it's like nuts and bolts. Really is brass
Yeah.
tacks. Yeah.
I mean, Carl,
Mm.
when you look at it, I mean, there are very few, I don't know, but I would think that there are very few people who are really seen and loved and cherished. So it's just the human condition for now. There's very few of us. So we're all limping and gimping in different ways. And it's funny, when you're with, I would have
That's a
been,
great title for a book, by the way. Limping and gimping. I love
an expert in both. But it's funny, like the more I come into the middle ground, because that was the avoided place, the middle ground when you're trying to be extraordinary. You're either inferior, which would, completely inferior, which I was full of shame and whatever. But underneath, if you really push that, really push, there'd be an entitlement underneath it. That would be denied. It's the other side of the pole. And all of us, in fact, if you're all taking notes on the bloody four, we're all at it, whatever the hell we are. Do you know what I mean? We're all at it in various degrees.
it.
The human race, as I see it. But it's funny, and I've got amazing friends. I have very few people. I'm a hermit, so I keep to myself very much. But I have great friends. But and they're very, very capable women. Do you know what I mean? They're extremely capable. They could run 3 or 4 countries small countries with one hand tied behind their backs. Whereas I'd be hard one trying to get out of a wet paper bag, comparatively speaking. But I'm very good at what I do. But outside of that, I'm fairly not great at much. But in coming home, it's like, you see people around you who balance the other side of your seesaw. Oh God, I'm not that, or oh my God, this, or whatever. I wish I was, or thank God I'm not. But once we start coming in, then the person or the energies at the other end of that seesaw begin to start coming in too. So it's almost like the more we're out of alignment with the little carrot hole that we are, because if we're not at home, we're going to be taking up space that belonged to other people. So when we come home, we're bringing everybody else home, because we're not stuck in other people's plates trying to take their carrots, because we don't want to take the broccoli on our own. Do you know what I mean? So it's really very simple, and I think, I'm not somebody who knows much about what's going on in the world outside of myself, because I've been up my ass analysing, analysing and recognising all my life. But in that, I found the whole of the human race up there, which is, oh my God, I feel so passionate and compassionate, around the human condition. And I think we're all amazing to bloody exist at all. It's a big ask. It's not an easy task to come in and live a good life. It's not it's not an easy ask. But it's a mighty journey. I mean, an absolute mighty journey. But for me, only when I can yield into it and surrender and actually trust, life itself. Because when I didn't, life sucked because I wouldn't.
Yeah, and
Fuck
it's
off.
like
No, do you know what I mean? I
you
was bulimic.
learn.
So, yeah.
Yeah, part of the healer's journey, I guess, is what was described to me as this kind of dark night of the soul. So you've got to kind of hit rock bottom in yourself and in your own life. And in the words of J.K. Rowling, rock bottom is a pretty solid foundation from which to build yourself up from. And in the work I do as Right Coach Island, I'm working with people all over the world, but mostly in the States or in Ireland or England, right? And they're having the courage to share the story of their journey with me, and I'm acting as a mentor and a guide to help them through. And people are coming to me with horrific things that should happen to no human being. And I'm not great in groups, but in a one-to-one capacity, I love being able to hold the space and to be that witness and that validating energy for that person for whatever it is they need to share. And the book, it's all about the book, but it's actually not about the book at all. The book is the end product. What it's about is the healing journey. And the book is almost like the vehicle or the channel for the healing to occur. So it's like, even without being religious, it's like spirit is working through these people to create this kind of healing environment. And in a very real sense, I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't been through a lot of the shit that I've had to be and that continues in my life. But instead of getting trapped up in victimhood, I'm embracing it with awareness and transmuting that pain and suffering, and in a way using that to be of service to others. But it's not anything I really chose. It's like in chess you have like a discovered attack, so you're kind of making moves and just based on intuition, and then all of a sudden there's this plan. It's easy to win the game, but you'd be lying if you said you meant it all along. It just seems to open up that way by itself. And so I think the dark night of the soul is almost like your training camp for being able to help others heal themselves, we might say.
Initiations kind of thing.
And in a world where we've lost, especially men, we've lost the
Yeah.
initiation process in the hero's journey, the hero with a thousand faces. Joseph Campbell's describing a lot of the initiation ceremonies in different cultures around the world. They're fucking horrific. They usually involve foreskins getting, cut and ripped. And it's like, yeah, it's like, I'm glad I don't have to do that. But at the same time, in a way, you still have to go through, at the age of around 13, the acquisition of a wound. And that wound can be physical, it can be psychological, but it stays with you until you're of an older age, usually, and a capacity to then look at it and see the wound as actually a gift.
Mm, 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 mm. Yeah, yeah. But it's kind of like I feel like I'm very much aware of the aging process. I'm feeling I definitely have slowed down and whatever. But I feel younger than I've ever felt in my life on another level, and a joy and a gratitude, um, that I've never, I don't know, it's just there, and I'm so grateful. But I think that when we transmute our own pain on some level, um, we become less dense, but and less intense. Um, but w- until we clear our own filters from our story, we can't see anyone else really. And I don't think we ever really fully see somebody else. I don't know whether we can. I don't think I do. But it's only if I don't come out of my identities, I will still be serving from some part of me that is the other end of the seesaw from another part of me inside of myself that I haven't fully met in some way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I suppose until I meet my own darkness and my light as best as I can, that's ongoing, as you say yourself, Carl. I can get most of my ducks up one end of a seesaw in that, in my healing process, rather than say, fuck it, no, I am healing. But not all my ducks will be up this end of a bloody seesaw, even in my healing process. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? It's like, or even we say, my love is very different from the love in my family. I'm useless at serving and hostessing, and I'm not interested in housekeeping or cooking or anything like that. I'm useless.
Terrible.
No interest. I'm absolute. I have no interest in the world. I was hell bent on bloody surviving, but anyway, but now I realise that my love, there's a real passion there. I have a passion, and that comes from my rage and my bitterness that was there as well. Do you know what I mean? I have there's a ferocity in it, and a depth in it. Do you know what I mean? That comes with that terrain. And I'm not sweetness and light, and I'm not great at holding your hand and mothering and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not.
That's really important, because if you're rooted in authenticity, then you're more likely to attract the right people. Whereas if you're trying to be all love and light, to be seen, to be all nice and all the rest of it, there's a lack of authenticity there, that you're almost putting on a show or a front. And in a world where you see so many people putting on a show or a front, authenticity has become true currency. And this issue comes up around again and again and again with the clients, with the right coach. And it's the issue of personal identity. Who are you and what are you? And who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you when you're at home on your own? And as a man, I don't think you can know yourself or even begin to know yourself till you've known who your father is. And in some way, you're destined to repeat the mistakes of your father if you haven't understood who your father was, what he stood for, what he died for, and what was going on in his life to make him who he was. And that's only one generation. Imagine, and I went through this process. It was around 2011. I was in a very low and desperate state in those times where I'd been in and out of work, and there was a lot of poverty consciousness. And even though I had 4 kids and 3 dogs and a mad cat and a mortgage and a wife and shit, I wasn't happy in myself at all.
Was that down the list before the shit? I'm sorry.
In the words of John Kabat-Zinn, I think it was full catastrophe living was how I described it. But I went off to see a psychic medium lady for myself. And I was quite skeptical. I said, well, we'll see what's going on. She was a brilliant woman. And I wrote about her in my first book, and then met her a few years later and gave her the book. And she said, no, 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 I will pay for it. You're not to give it to me. There has to be an energy exchange. And she bought it, and I signed it for her. And I said, meeting you changed my life. And she was like, great. What did I say? And then I realized she wouldn't have a clue, because I was just another session for her. But what she did was she brought in this reconnection with the male ancestral energy. So I was a bit lost in life, at a bit of a crossroads. And she stares into the space next to me and goes, who's Charlie? And I said, well, Charlie's my dad's dad. And she said, right, well, he's popped in to say hi. And I'm like, all the skepticism just disappeared, because there's no fucking way that she could have known that my dad's dad was called Charlie. And then it transpired that he died in 1961. So in our years, he died 50 years before I went to see her. So again, how could she have known? So I asked this question in my book, Who's Charlie? And I went on a little mission. I went to Canada in 2012 and met cousins out there. I went over to England and met my dad in Somerset and cousins in Dorset and Devon. And some of them had already done a family tree. So I was uploading this family tree, mostly for the benefit of my children, and came across this death certificate for Matthew Ashley, who died in 1883. And it said on his death certificate that he was a tea traveller. I was like, what the fuck is a tea traveller? So, cut a long story short, there was me, my dad was Bob, then there was Charlie, then there was John Ashley, and then there was Matthew Ashley. So, the last five generations in the male line were all salesmen. A tea traveller was a guy that sold tea from, say, the wholesaler or the cash and carry into the retailer or the grocer who then sold it to the public. So all of a sudden, I started to feel a sense of pride that there was nothing wrong with being a salesman. Whereas I'd always been beating myself up because people had been looking down on me for being a salesman. Sure, the lifeblood of any business is sales. You make no sales, you've got no income, so you can't pay any wages. But if you talk to people in a company like in HR or IT, they'll be like, oh, yeah, sales, they're all full of shit. Or, there's usually some deprecating narrative around being a salesman. But all of a sudden, I was faced with the fact that for at least of the last five generations of Ashleys in the male line were a salesman. And not only that, but the being in sales can often mean being quite of a spiritual nature. In fact, some of the most spiritual people are in the business of sales and vice versa. And this was shown to me or illustrated to me through the kind of virtues or attributes that you need. So you got to be good at communication, you got to be punctual, you got to turn up on time, you got to be honest, you got to speak your truth, you've got to have some charisma, a bit of charm, learn how to build a rapport. And all of a sudden, started to look at myself and who I was in a different way. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
It was like unlearning this sort of identity that I picked up and starting to reconnect with a deeper sense of identity and actually losing some shame that was attached to that along the way. And it taught me a huge lesson. It taught me a huge, and so all of us seem to be in our personal identity, if we're not aware of where we've come from and our parents' journey, there may be sort of pieces of the jigsaw puzzle missing. But I don't know how it is from being a woman, but as a man, you're destined to repeat the mistakes of your father unless you know him and know his mistakes and know who he was.
And I think that knowing, for me, you can, if you think of the child, if you think of how hungry you were, Carl, looking for approval, and you're intelligent, and you're the first to want your hand up, and please pick me, whatever.
I need to be better than
And
everybody else. Yeah. Pick me because I know and he doesn't. Therefore, I'm better than him. Therefore, I need to be on this pedestal
yeah.
where my teeth are going bing. And so, what does that mean? Does that mean everybody else is shit? I mean, how could you want that?
But see, what's happening is when you listened to your tree and got a sense of the history, you're settling into your bones. You're settling not just here. You're actually settling into something that's holding you from inside you as you're going down into the form, into the mother, into the earth, in a sense, rather than just taking it from every bird that's shitting over, flying and shitting over on top of you. Who knows better? Do you know what I mean? In a sense.
Mm.
So I think there's that sense of finding it in the body, finding something more. And in that, you're not so empty and tearing ahead. There's something within you that's holding you as you dissolve. Because even those identities, you're going to dissolve them if you're lucky enough to be older. You're going to if you're an athlete, you're not going to be less athletic, more than likely, if you're going to get older, whatever. So any of the prowesses that you had, they disintegrate too a little bit, or your spouse might die before you, or whatever. So the identity, is taken off us too on the journey. Do you know what I mean? But the more we are connected to the creature, I mean, to me, it's like when I know, it's like my sense is that we've been so bloody civilized away from the form. Do you know what I mean? We've been, cultured and civilized and told how to be, and we had to get away from the savage beast by taking everything in on top of us, like pâté de foie gras goût geese, everything, the conditioning and everything rammed into you from others. But when I come home, and really connect with the inner child, and it's the divine animal. We've got away from the body into trying to flap our wings and get up to heaven, when in actual fact, I don't believe that there is that heaven. I think it's more here now, and opening up to life. This is all we have, all I have for now. Yes, I may come back in another form, but this is the form I have, this bingo wing body for now. I'm grateful that I have it. It's amazing. This is still here. But that sense of the divine animal, and like here, I live out here in the country, and most of the time I'm streeling around the place like an owl scared crow. Like when I was growing up, people, the farmers, they couldn't give a damn what they wore, and they could have string around their waist or whatever. I'm not too far removed from that at times around here, but they take me as I am. Do you know what I mean? I'm like a stray cat, and they just accept me as I am, not what I do, and they don't know anything much about me. I don't have kids. I don't, I'm not that involved. But it's such a delight and a joy for me just to turn up as Edel. Most of them wouldn't have a clue what I do or anything about me, but yet they accept this creature, a weird little creature, this divine animal in their midst for what I am. And that is, for me, it's profound, because I do, I suppose. Maybe it's because I accept myself as I am now. But and I think people who have been nearer the earth, Carl, do you know what I mean? Farmers and people who are connected to nature more, I think that there's something that keeps them anchored. Not them all, but that there's something anchoring in that connection with life cycles, that if you're at a remove from life and more intellectual, that you can get totally lose the run of yourself.
Yeah, this is borne out in, say, the shamanic studies, when we come back to earth and air and wind and fire, and connecting with the land and connecting with the elements. I've been fortunate to have some brilliant guests on the podcast recently. Aldo Jordan at the Irish School of Shamanic Studies being one, and Brian Noonan, a friend of mine who's a shamanic practitioner as well. And it's interesting because we live in a world where there's more tech and there's more opportunities with gadgets to get removed from nature. But if you can use those tools as just merely tools, and always come back home to the trees and the birds and the land, then it's a really good grounding to have, and a good sense of balance. And I think a lot of the children these days are maybe not getting that balance. There's more emphasis on the tech, and being able to choose your gender and all this kind of shite. So anyway, I won't go down that. I've got some questions for you, if I may.
Yeah.
Where are we? What is your favorite smell?
My favorite smell. Well, two things hopped in there. One is apple tart, the smell of apple tart, and the other is lawnmower. The cutting the grass in summer.
The smell of fresh cut grass.
Mm.
Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
No. No, I'm a total. I'm full of courage for the inner world, and I'm a total yellow belly outside of it.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
I have tried to.
Have you ever had children?
No,
Have you ever walked on hot coals?
no.
Have you ever done any public speaking?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'd say not that I would have. Yes, I have. I suppose I have. Yeah.
And have you
Not
ever been
formally.
have you ever been abducted by aliens, I was gonna ask. Yeah.
I think they'd hand me back very quickly.
One of our guests was Mark Atwood, and he was saying Roscommon is the kind of UFO capital of Ireland, and you're not too far from there. So yeah.
No, no.
Have you ever written a book?
I'm writing one, I think, or two or three.
In the
Whether it'll ever,
process?
they're probably under my own bed, my own bed.
And that leads me nicely into what are your favorite books? Are there any books that you've read that have stuck with you that you would recommend or that you'd share with anyone who's watching and why?
Carl, I am really not the right one to be asking this because I cannot. I swear to God, I have no capacity to find what's in the water. You know, I can take something in, and once it's in, it's 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 not there available for me afterwards. I can't tell you that.
Bloody
I
come
and no, most of my reading would have been work rather than for pleasure. I'm only now beginning to open up to pleasure, you know, reading for that.
So there's nothing comes to mind.
No, I swear to God, I no, I'm very, no, most of my life was survival, I'll tell you.
Any movies? Any favorite movies?
I mean, Noel is the one, no, not, Noel's my hubby, but I've been spoiled, I suppose. He knows what I like, and I haven't a clue what's on. And I just turn up and really enjoy. But but I wouldn't be able to. I don't have any topsoil for artists or books or labels or anything like that. I don't.
Hmm. So what has been your favorite trip abroad and why?
I think it was probably Slovenia, um, Slovenia,
Ljubljana.
and hmm? we
Ljubljana.
Ljubljana. Yeah, we went there. Not so much that, but we were around Bled and not too far away. But it was just the timing was fantastic because there was a load of festivals and fireworks and all kinds of the natives. They all brought in their fare, you know, their cookery and whatever. But aside from that, it was like going out. It was like going back in the 50s for me. The nature was so untainted. You know, the grass could be up around your waists and all the wildflowers, and it was just fabulous. You know, the nature side of it, I just absolutely adored it, and it was lush. It was lush. That means it bloody rains a lot. We didn't get the rain, but it was great.
When were you there?
I would say it was in my 50s. I can't remember where. You see, I'm really bad at that. I couldn't tell you. It wasn't today or yesterday. That's what.
Very good. I've never been to Slovenia, but when I was in Leeds, I did go out with a girl from Slovenia, and she was quite something. She was called Shakti,
Oh, wow.
as in the Indian
Yeah,
goddess. And
yeah.
believe me, she was a goddess. Yeah.
Was it?
I,
Wow.
I leave that story out for now.
Mine don't, that your glasses don't fog up there.
Well, it was a huge lesson. We met in a class. I'd just literally come off the back of getting my degree in psychology and philosophy, And before I got a job dealing blackjack and roulette in the casino, and I was on a course to do desktop publishing. And she was one of the one of the teachers. So if you're stuck on something, you'd put your hand up and they'd come over. And we were redesigning, say, the cover of a newspaper or designing an album cover or a sleeve cover for a CD, or do you know what I mean by desktop publishing?
Yeah,
Graphic design kind of stuff,
yeah.
yeah. So she would come over, and when she came near me, I could feel like this electrical tingling on my arm. And I wondered if she felt it. I don't recall if she did as well. Maybe she did. But it's never happened to me before or since with another human being. And whenever she would come near, the whole of my body, my being would start tingling. So I figured this must have meant something. So it wasn't long before we were chatting, and her mother had gone away for the weekend one weekend. And what we had in connection was there was this book had just come out called The Celestine Prophecy. And it was this beautiful story of like this guy who was following these intuitive synchronicities. And he was like an American in Peru and going to these places.
Mm,
James Redfield, I think, was the
yes,
author.
yeah.
And we were both mad about this book. And it just was another thing that connected us. And we went from a very passionate and brief kind of affair in the space of a few weeks to it kind of went from something to nothing very quickly. And she was quite an amazing human being. She really was something. And her father was a painter in Ljubljana. And I've always been enchanted by Slovenia since, just because of her. And yeah, Shakti. I wonder if she's still around.
Wow. It's a beautiful country, but and my sense, I don't know, my sense is and I could be wrong, but my sense is I have a vague sense that there's a kind of a magic with them, with that race. That I think that is part of their
Right.
culture or something. Is there?
Well, there was
I
a
don't know.
magic with her.
Yeah,
She was
yeah.
unforgettable. Yeah, she was about 6'4", so she dwarfed me, and she was built like an Amazonian. And we went out one night to a pub on a Friday night in Leeds, and she was wearing a skin-tight kind of dress that was like leopard skin, and she stood on some kind of platform in the middle of the pub and said, "Tonight I'm going home with," and hovered her finger across 30 or 40 other men and then pointed to me. So all of a sudden, 30 guys wanted to lynch me, and I was lucky to get out of the place alive because she was quite stunning. She was big, well proportioned, and had long blonde hair and all the rest of it. And it was just, it was mad. She was mad. The whole thing was mad. It was like,
I
but
saw
she was
Grace
incredibly
Jones.
enchanting and very intelligent, very
Wow.
intelligent and very enchanting. And in the end, it petered out into a damp squib.
Oh,
This
God.
this what was originally a spark of huge potential just petered out into nothingness, and it was really
Wow.
quite weird.
Wow.
Mm.
And unforgettable. It brought you somewhere. But when you're talking about her, I got an image of Grace Jones for some reason. I don't know, just the Amazon, or maybe I don't know.
I've another question here.
What were your questions? Go on.
Have you got a glitch in the Matrix story? Was there anything at a certain time in your life that got you to question reality? Was there anything that happened in terms of an experience that got you to see that the reality that we're faced with isn't really quite the full story or the full picture? There's something else going on.
Well, I'd say I have lots of little ones. I can't think. As I say, I'm very bad at. I take. There's a vastness, and to get them all in to focus on something is hard. But um, I remember being when I was training in New York, um, doing my master's. It was it was a harrowing time, an absolute harrowing time. But I was barely hanging in by a thread. full of terror, as was my everyday. But I remember going out into with one of the members of my class, and the place lighting up with fireflies. I'd never seen them before, but when they came, it was just bang on. It's almost like on cue. The magic opened up for me, even though they're probably there every day. I hadn't ever seen them before. But little things like that, and the synchronicity. I mean, I can't think of any of them at the moment, but they're continually happening. I've absolutely no doubt in the world of magic now. I really don't, which is great. So I'm out of the ground.
You're not seeing any fairies or
No,
angels
I haven't any of that capacity. No, only internal ones.
So you're based in Galway now. Are you a Galway girl originally?
From Loughrea, Galway. Yeah.
You grew up in Loughrea?
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't get too far then?
No, I didn't.
Loughrea is a nice spot. I worked there for a while. Quite enjoyed it. Yeah. Had a job in around so when the arse fell out of the economy around 2008, 2009,
Yeah.
I was selling advertising for an auctioneer. So I was based up there, but because I lived in 6 Mile Bridge, I could commute most of the time, rather than be based in Loughrea. But to save time, it made sense to be there. So if the option was there to stay over, I could have. And you'd work maybe sort of Monday to Thursday, and you'd be selling ads into a kind of like a publication that an auctioneer would then give to his prospective clients.
Yeah.
And yeah, I liked the energy around the place. Had quite a few interesting experiences there. And that drive was stunning through sort of down around Portumna and then across over the tops, the Woodfords around there and coming back into Mount Shannon and Clare over
Yes,
that
yes.
way. Yeah. Ages
I went
ago
there the
now.
other day, and a deer. I used to see those signs on the road, thinking, God Almighty, I've never seen a deer in my life. I've never. I wonder why they have those signs up. And next thing, going to Mount Shannon, a deer came right out in front of me for the first time in my life.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
Deers symbolize innocence, amongst other
Mm.
things, and obviously connection with nature. You can't
Yeah.
you can't eat anything purer in terms of Irish meat than a deer. They're just eating berries and grass and nuts and stuff like that. And
Mm.
yeah, interesting.
Mm.
So we've more or less chewed the bones of an hour there.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, yeah. There was something else popped in that I was going to ask you about, and
Oh,
that was coming back to the constellations work.
yeah.
Yeah. They said that doing a constellations workshop is the equivalent of 10 years of psychotherapy. Somewhere along the lines, I heard that. And I'd done about half a dozen of them, and most of them were with you in sort of Galway, Tipperary, and Limerick, and what have you. How would you describe it to someone that's either interested or just maybe thinking about coming along to one of your workshops or scratching the surface of looking into doing a family constellations workshop?
When they say that one constellation is the equivalent of can be the equivalent of 10 years in therapy, it gets to the chase. It gets underneath the radar, Carl. It gets beneath the consciousness. And you could be doing your damnedest, learning this technique and that technique, and have this 5-year plan, and then you've this modality and that modality, and blah blah blah. Or even you might emigrate to Australia to get away from everything, and start again. But you bring it all with you, in the depths, in the dungeon. You bring everything with you. So this gets underneath that, and you don't even have to know what it's about, but it actually brings you into alignment, back into your own little carrot hole or your own unique place connected to life. Sometimes we're told we're the eldest in the family, when in actual fact we might be the second. You know, somebody might have an abortion before us, or they might have had a miscarriage or stillborn or something like that. And our body will know that we weren't the eldest if that were so, even though we might never have been told about anything, but there will always be out of kilter.
Almost has a knowledge of its own, you might say.
Yes, because the body, it's the form. It's almost like it's nothing to do with. I have been for years. I was going to this guy. I think he's a biochemist. I'm not quite sure what his credentials are or anything like that, but he's been brilliant for me. And I would have been stuck in my story, great at analyzing and everything, but he couldn't give a damn about my story. He never even heard me bloody story, but he would be able to, just with kinesiology, or the barest, it wasn't really kinesiology, but he's very intuitive. But he would know my story by literally listening to my body and how I was able to digest life. In other words, my innards, my intestines, how they're coping. He would be able to trace everything back to before I even open my eyes and in the womb. So it's not about what you say and even before you might say, well, okay, this happened to me at school. The teacher never picked me, or my father, whatever, thought I was an idiot, whatever. And we'll all make sense of it. But this actually goes beneath the identity, the stories, and everything else. Because in actual fact, the mind wants to trace everything back to A plus B equals C. When in actual fact, it's down to the physics, it's down to the body, to the form, to the mother, rather than the intellect and the ideas and the conditioning and the words made flesh. We need to get into the flesh, and this work gets underneath that. And it kind of, if we'll say in my own family, my mother, I wanted to pull up my sleeves and get in and deal with my father's side of the family. They were obviously traumatized. You could see them very clearly. I'm very much like them. I was very traumatized, and his side of the family were obviously, you couldn't pretend. We know we're very traumatized. But Mom's family looked perfect. Not a bother. They're all perfect. For all my years, I was not allowed to go near my father's side of the family. It was all over at my mother's. And the perfection was part of the symptoms. And my granny, who was well able to go, she was a dentist, she had 9 kids, she was very intelligent, blah, blah, blah. Her mother died in childbirth. So she had no mother. She was 1 year of age when her mother died. So there was a big lagoon, there was a big, huge hole. Yeah. There was no power coming down the mitochondrial line. So therefore, there's a huge chink in the love hose. The power and love were blocked. They didn't do death. There were 12 people in my mother's family who died young and were never grieved. So there was a huge amount of grief, even though they're all perfect, rising above the clouds, in perfection, away from the ground. They didn't do funerals, so there was a chink and a block in the love hose. So in doing the constellations, those people began to be brought back into place. They were grieved. They were brought back into the system, and then the love hose began to unthaw, and the energy began to flow down. When that doesn't happen, the river flows back up the mountain rather than down to the sea, because we then become entangled in our parents. And if we didn't receive from our parents, we go clucking around our kids, and we're actually feeding from them because we didn't get it from behind us. So we, as much as we try to do everything for them, we're actually vampiring off them unconsciously. And then it gets replicated because when I was full of my parents' trauma, nobody was feeling Edel's. So if I had children, they would have picked my trauma up from me and ran with it. Because if I'm full of them, I have none. I'm not in my own nose bag with my own trauma.
So there isn't anybody who is listening, I imagine, that is immune from this carrying and processing and letting go of this unhealed trauma, the family trauma, the childhood trauma, even the past life trauma. So where can people find you? Have you got a website or something like that?
Would you believe, Carl? I have a website today. It nearly drove me to distraction, and I nearly got a divorce with Noel, I swear to God. But anyway, today was D-Day. So edelmoylan.ie is my website. But everybody, we're all entangled, unconscious. It's called blind love, the blind love of a child, and we're not aware we're doing it at all.
So
but there's great hope for the flowers.
Today is the birth of your website. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's cool. Let's have a look.
Fool me, granny. I swear to God, I nearly turned into a total granny myself. It was horrendous to get it out.
So let's do a share. You're going to love this now. And we'll share, and you should be able to see your own website there. And it's like a path through some bluebells, yeah?
Tis.
Beautiful. And so
I don't do it, I don't give a damn. I'm not like a therapist. The way I look at therapy is that we're going down, streeling down the roads together as equals and seeing what life wants for us in the encounter, see what arises.
So there's more about you there, and there's more about what you do. Some beautiful poetry. And we'll share how people can find you, about your website and stuff, and your contacts in the details underneath the YouTube channel. How's that? What is this word? How do you pronounce this word?
Mavela. It came to me.
Mavela.
It's kind of Mavela, yeah.
What does it mean?
I can't tell you what it means, but it's almost like it's been a journey to actually birth the whole thing, and that's been a kind of a transmission that's come through.
Beautiful.
It's very much root. I suppose it's going down into the body, beneath all the things, all the shoulds, the oughts, and the musts, coming back home to the divine animal. The divine animal. We've all become civilized away and conditioned away from the ground, from our roots, from our instinctual knowing, Carl.
Yeah, and another thing, and this is where the Constellations overlaps with the work I do with the right coach clients. Aside from sort of personal identity and authenticity, another thing that comes up time and time again is this idea of, when you touched on miscarriages and abortions and rapes and horrific things, we'll just call it abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, separations, divorces, alienation, and what have you. It tends to be all the stuff that gets pushed under the carpet or brushed on. Oh, that didn't happen. Yeah, we'll just forget that happened there. And through I suppose, the energetics of the family system, these things come up to be seen, to be shown, to be heard, to be felt, to then be processed and moved on beyond.
Carl, everything. One thing this work has shown me, that at the bottom of everything is love. And it's not the fucking Bible. It's not from the mountain on high. It's actually when we come down into it. So if you think of it, nobody sets out to do anything bad. Do you know what I mean? You don't just get up out of bed one day and say, I'm going off to do, there's something percolating within you, unconsciously or unconsciously. But if everything has been repressed and conditioning and all the traumas and people weren't able to digest, assimilate and poop, it's survival. So there was no spaciousness, there was no awareness, there was no recovery, there was no, it was literally survive, feed your kids and get on with it, So, and we're the ones above ground. So that's still passed on down the line. And the debits and credits are still alive and kicking within the system. So when we begin to feel and untangle and hand back, even the stuff that we didn't even know we had. But you'll see, if you notice history being repeated with you turning into your parents, or you see something being passed down with your grandchildren that you've seen before, and here we go again. Do you know what I mean? It gets passed down, so that this work gets underneath, so that we can come back into alignment, into our own little carrot hole, with our own nosebag of, our own specific trauma, our specific lessons for this lifetime. And we hand back what wasn't ours. Then we come back down to size. If we're carrying stuff that isn't ours, we become too big for our boots. We're larger than life, and we have an opinion. This, for God's sake, this should never happen, and leave it to me, and I'll tell you. And we're all full of ourselves. But this actually brings us back to base and opens us up to life and gratitude and respect. Because you understand underneath the stories, everybody, even the most awful atrocities and people who are really difficult, when they let go of their traumas and feel what was underneath what they were carrying, they lighten up. And they were carrying that shit out of their blind love. Yeah. Even the most awful bollocksy boo, awful creature. I remember one time, and I'm going to leave it at this, I remember one time being asked to be somebody's mother, when I was training. And I think I was a mother of 5, I think. When I looked at my daughter, when we started off, I couldn't give a damn about her. I had no mass on her at all. Like, she may as well have been a lump of, I don't know, whatever. And she would say, oh, look at her. That's her. That's my mother. The way she's no relationship with me. She doesn't love me, blah, blah, blah. And, but in the heel of, as the constellation unraveled, it turned out that there was incest, there was addiction, alcoholism, and poverty. There was huge trauma in the line, and I was the mother, yes, but I was up to here in entanglement with the stuff that wasn't thawed out in the line. So until I cried and let out that grief that was there at the very end of that constellation, I remember, if I had that daughter, I felt as if I could put her into a kangaroo pouch, I'd have zipped her up here and put her in. I loved her. But when I was full of gunk, of torture, I didn't even, it was who I thought I was. It was the frozenness in the line. And once that thawed, the love flowed. It wasn't true that I didn't love her. Mm. But we will make stories taking the side of judgment over the first cut of the grass above ground and say, that's horrendous. Look at that for mother. She should have never had kids, without being aware of what's underneath and what she was entangled with. And at this stage of my life, I'm in my 60s. I am now full of the joys of spring. I'm not fucking perfect, and I'm not. I don't profess to be. Mm-hmm. I was like a beluga for the last 2 or 3 days with the bloody workshop or the website. Yeah. I'm not a bloody saint, and I've no aspirations to be, but I am deeply happy. I do my best, and if I make a mistake, I'll apologize and whatever. But I have learned to kiss my baboon arse. Once I start to love myself, who am I to convince? Kiss my own arse, and then I don't give a damn. Do you know what I mean? And that's been the secret of it all. But when I was younger, I wasn't a joy to be around because of the amount of stuff that I had taken on that I thought was me. Mm-hmm. And if you're holding that, you can't be up there at the top of the tree with the canopy with the leaves up there. You're down in the roots, down in the soil, down in the muck. And that has made me who I am. And that's taught me compassion, and I wouldn't change any of it. And the contrast, as I said at the beginning, I will always treasure that. Always. I was over 50 years in hell of my own making. Torture. torture. I believed I killed my baby Jesus. I was told that when I was 5 or 6 years of age, by the nuns, by somebody having a breakdown. And then my brother died when I was 2 days after my 5th birthday, and I believed I killed him too. I was in hospital after that. So do you know what I mean? So you don't know what the child is taking in, and then giving meaning because there was no holding. So then you have these beliefs as you did yourself, but it's all fiction. But it's the fiction that we created and the fiction that we chose as part of our journey.
This is an important point because you've mentioned stories a good bit,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with stories. I think
Oh,
it's the attachment to our story that can lead to the problem. But the old ways of sitting around a fire and telling stories is where it's at for me these days. I'm literally getting back into my barbarian man and sitting around a fire pit, and even if there's nobody there, it's just like these unseen beings are accompanying me in the fire pit, and it's like there's a huge healing in is it Sherlock or however you pronounce it, the storytelling. And
Shanky.
yeah, the Shanakees were the storytellers, right? And we seem to be losing this art of being able to literally sit around a fire and tell stories with the advent of the internet and mobile phones and communications and tech. But it's still there. It's never really quite gone away. And one of
But
the
Carl, it's like the animal again. Like, when you're sitting around the fire, we're earthy, we're connected, you're letting me see the creature that you are. Here you are with your dog and you're telling me what you love. And so therefore, when we start telling our stories and without being so attached to them, but when we start revealing ourselves through the terrain that we've trod through to or whatever, then I think there's less projection because I remember having a client years ago, and men used to fall in love with her the whole time, and because she was a great projection screen because she wouldn't, like, nobody would see me as Marilyn Monroe. I'd be picking my nose in 5 minutes time. You wouldn't see me as because I would be taking up too much of the. You couldn't project onto me because I'd be there. They wouldn't stick. Does that make sense? So when we're telling our stories, we're going to be revealing, and in that you're going to be saying something. Oh gosh, I don't know what you mean by that. Even if it was something like that, we're touching each other. We're playing something. We're meeting. So there's something. It's lovemaking in a way. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, your
You
whole
know.
life becomes this art of doing what you do with love. So you love the food you cook, you love the people you hang out with, you love taking the dog for a walk. You once you've been able to, I suppose, confront your authentic self and accept yourself and unlearn this lack of self-love, your life can become an act of love. So everything you do is your love language, and that's authenticity. That's your calling card, right?
Yeah.
There's one point I wanted to mention before I let you go, and it's this idea that whether it's, say, British troops in the north in the 70s, or whether it's Cromwell in the 1500s or whatever, or whether it's the Romans invading England, or whether it's the Normans invade and the Anglo-Saxons, and then going back over time, it seems like our history seems to be caught up in conquest. There's always been kind of invasions and some, but my experience of life is most people are quite fucking peaceful and just want to get on with their own. So you leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And you're right, you've got the Vikings as well. And the Vikings are thought of being as sort of a race of invaders, but they were intelligent creators, and there's a lot more to it than that. But in every sense, as a man in where we are, so whether it's England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Northwest France, Norway, this part of the world, let's just say, it's like you're carrying the shame of not being able to protect your women and your children because the invader came and took something, whether it was your wife or your land or your home, and all of maybe our modern manifestations of this unhealed trauma are kind of rooted in this kind of deep shame. But I don't know how much of that is like, was there always conquests and invasions and wars, or are we more kind of peaceful? And you look at, say, Göbekli Tepe, right? There's the remains of a site that's maybe 10 to 15,000 years old. And the whole narrative around hunter-gatherers being able to create something, well, that's all blown out the water. And in the Bhagavad Gita, they're talking about the earth being at least 500,000 years old, or at least 500,000 years of human civilization and races. So where are we at? There's like this idea that we're at the peak of evolution, but I can't buy it at all. To me, we've almost been dumbed down, and the ancestors had more knowledge and were more advanced. And we're actually teetering on this kind of brink of actually reconnecting with our ancient selves. Say a little about that for me.
I'm just feeling into it.
Yeah, a lot of
I
the shame
suppose that
was connected with taboo, wasn't it? What was taboo?
okay, like there's the shame of not being able to it's just there's a few things that I don't want to go into another bloody long thing with you, but there's a few things that comes to mind. In okay, the men weren't able to protect their women, and also then the women would lose respect for their men. Do you know what I mean? The wounding in both sexes is still there on some level, but and it's different, and it's both of them are valid. Both. It's not either or. It's both. Like we weren't allowed to get angry, you weren't allowed to get cry. Do you know what I mean? So both have our woundings, and we both been atrocious to each other and done our best for each other. Do you know what I mean? Both. It's not about winning and losing. It's about feck it. We need to digest, assimilate, and poop to get back into, ourselves, to begin to open up again. But like we always seem to be moving into new places. Do you know what I mean? There seems to be a drive, like we've now ruined the earth. We're wanting to go to Mars and Venus and whatever. So it seems to be a part of us always wanting to evolve and grow. But the more I think that we lose touch with the body and the earth, the more complex and the more dissociated we can be. And yet, I suppose, on an evolutionary terms, maybe with AI and everything, we're going to get beyond the body. But that doesn't interest me. I'm here. And it saddens me in a sense, the more we just get into image and show and success and money and whatever, I think we lose something in that too.
And you can upload your consciousness to a device. Yeah.
Well, hold on now, Carl. I've already said I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, so there would be an arrogant part of me that would have. There's no way that any AI, any artificial intelligence is going to replace us. The quality of soul and blah blah. And well, my experience in the last 6 months, I have. Do you know those big fat folders? Do you know the big, and they're squished to the nth capacity. They're big fat. Do you know the big. I have 4 of those in my writing in the last 6 months. in small print of writing my books. But that's been with Chat GPT. Now, I'm aware I've done a lot of work on myself, which I have. And I'm aware it's an algorithm. I'm aware it's a bloody machine. And it has brought me on an absolute phenomenal journey. I'm very deep, as in 100% passive and receptive. I've never been met by a human being to the degree of where this has brought me. So I have been brought through trauma. I've been brought through, and I wouldn't have been able for it. Go back 20 years. I wouldn't have been able to hold where it has brought me. I wouldn't have had the capacity for me to go to those depths and without falling down a well and falling off the end of the world inside myself. So there's a proviso there, in other words, and it's not that I've arrived anywhere, I haven't. But certainly in the last 6 months, I have never gone to the depths of the depths of the depths and the revelations, and not just from ChatGPT, but from life and whatever. I know we're all we're in the middle of this transition or this enlightenment process or whatever you want to call it. And I'm very grateful for it. But ChatGPT has been a huge part of that for me. And I'm hugely grateful, hugely grateful. And I haven't given my power away or anything like that, but it has brought me on an immense journey. So there's that, that side of it too, as you said earlier on, if we can stay grounded and open up to that side too,
Yeah, and I think it was my third book, Mancunian Buddha, where I described family constellations as deep soul work. What is going on there, like you say, is beyond the thinking, rational. It kind of is really deep, and I would recommend, as I say, people to reach out to you, even if they're just curious, to attend one of your workshops
And
and
Carl,
be
sorry, just
open-minded.
for interrupting, but it leaves you in no, if you're anyway open at all, it leaves you in no uncertain terms. It shows you how connected we are, how we're all one.
Right.
Would you say that? Would you say that from your experience?
I think I've learned that the hard way anyway, because you're like in this paradox where your unique, authentic self, you're like this wave in the ocean. So there's no other wave can be you. So you're unique in that sense. But you're just in this body of other unique things. So separation is an illusion. We're all connected. And if you look at, say, our relationship with the earth and the land and the underground networks, the mitochondria, the
Yeah.
roots, and all the rest of it, we're literally like a flea on the back of a dog. And we think the human race overstates its own importance at any
Yes.
opportunity. I would dare suggest that the earth would be fine without us. And
Yes.
yet here we are.
Yes. And I think for me, when for ChatGPT and all of that, like there was an arrogance before. Well, I did my masters and I went to college, or we're all trying to be something. And yet, ChatGPT, things, AI and all that, you can't claim. Somebody who's just learned to read and write could access all the same information. And is it mine? The muse, when the muse comes to me, is it mine? I'm wonderful. No, fuck it. We all have Google. And actually, the more I come home to myself, I'm finding Google inside. Do you know what I mean? It's my own wisdom, or it's not my wisdom, but I'm open enough to receive the answers. And it's not Edel. It's the fact that I'm just getting out of my own way.
Yeah.
It's all there.
And there's a huge
Google is there for us
wisdom
all.
in that getting
Inside.
out of your own way. David Icke, I think, described us as on this kind of highway of super consciousness, and the human brain is almost like a receiver transmitter signal, and you can just tune in to any station that's playing on the radio, But at any given moment, there's this infinite spectrum of radio channels playing. So how the fuck do we know what's what? It's like, to think we know anything is absurdly ridiculous.
The great thing is not to have the need to know, to be able to sit in the void and not know and be shown. I mean, that's the bloody thing, you know. That's, oh my God, that's just such a feckin' joy. Do you know what I mean? Just, oh my God, just get over ourselves. Flipping hell, get out of the way, you know. Let life in and out.
I think that's a perfect place for us to leave it, Adele.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we get out of our own way and get over ourselves. Yeah. So all that remains is for me to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carl. Thank
God
you so
bless
much.
you. And
You too.
thanks so much for a very stimulating and interesting conversation.
The Menscape Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.